that's something I've never felt with you. And I've noticed the way that you kind of connect the dots with people. There's never like a wasted connection, and it's done quite in a classy way, not needy. And I'd be curious to know, how do you dissect the difference between the two, and how you do it? Is it more effective?
Yeah, so I'm pretty thoughtful when it comes to those things because ultimately I've been connecting people for a long time now and I've learned the things that work and the things that don't work. And when I connect people, I view that relationship as my responsibility to at least provide a runway for that thing to get going, right? And I've seen this happen multiple times where people like put two people in a group chat and they're like, "Hey, you guys are both great. Like like you should connect." And then they leave the chat as is. And I'm like, that's if you're going to go out of your way to connect someone and you will be responsible for them getting to know each other, whether it's a business partnership, a friendship, uh, partnership, whatever it is, that's your, this is my view. No one has to believe it, but I view that it's my responsibility to provide a runway for that relationship. And there's a reason why I want to connect these people. And so what I do is I first do the double opt-in approach, which is I check with one side. Hey, I'm going to introduce you to this person. I think it would be amazing for you to connect with them because of these reasons. Then I go to the other person. Hey, I want to connect you with this person, and here's why. And what I do is it's not just like layer one, layer two. It's like, oh, you guys are both in e-commerce, so I wanted you to meet. And you just happen to be my friends that are in e-commerce. Like, that's not really being, it's being a little lazy. It's not being thoughtful enough to like really get them motivated to want to connect. And so I'm like, hey, you guys are both in e-commerce. Your businesses are at the same exact places, and you guys are both trying a new form of marketing. I think it makes sense for you guys to talk. Think about how that lands versus you guys are just both in e-commerce and you're my friends. Like, so you want to almost provide a runway for them to get going. Now, what happens after that runway is not your responsibility. But in my belief, it is your responsibility to provide them with a nice runway for them to be motivated enough to want to actually reach out and connect with each other. And in this day and age where we're so distracted, our time is so limited, we have an internal bar of what it takes for us to actually do an action. And if you don't surpass each of their internal bars for them to want to take an action, they're not going to connect. And then ultimately, that chips away a little bit at your value when you connect two people and they don't finalize the connection or they don't actually end up meeting. So I've done this consistently for such a long time that I've gotten a little bit of a reputation that, hey, if Cal connects me, this is a high quality connection. I need to pay attention. Now, I earned that over 15 years of doing this in a thoughtful way because I'm taking time to actually invest in this connection. I'm busy too. Would I love to just take 30 seconds to connect these people? Yeah. But no, I take 10, 15 minutes to think about what it is that I can say to make sure these people actually want to connect with each other and come in with the right amount of motivation. And then I let it go, you know?
So we're talking about putting in the right and appropriate amount of time and effort into making that happen. I don't know if this is an easy question to answer, but like, do you think about what the return on investment is for that? Like, what's the value in prioritizing doing this over every other thing that's trying to take our attention? How have you measured that?
That's a good question. I get internal enjoyment out of connecting people. And
I'm
so,
asking for a friend.
yeah,
I
yeah,
get the
yeah.
same, but I've never been able to kind of quantify, but
Yeah,
it's one of those habits. I'm like, no, it's brought joy to my life, and it seems like
yeah,
it keeps giving back.
yeah. That's all that matters. Yeah, that's it. That's it. You nailed it. It gives me joy in life and it keeps giving me back and it makes me feel good. That's it. If you focus on that, you're going to keep connecting people. And whatever happens after that, the residual effects down the line, they do a business together, they do a partnership together. And ultimately, people are going to be like, hey, like, how did you guys meet? Like, oh man, Cal connected us. And like, that's a nice little extra bonus at the end. But ultimately, the art and the quality in doing it the right way is the thing that I enjoy because then that's a reflection of who I am and how I'm showing up in the world when I actually take effort and energy to connect people properly, which is not my main job. I don't get paid from that, but it brings me joy. And I know that if it helps other people, ultimately that's where I want to be doing.
So you share one thing that's quite tactical, but I think is so important. And we've had some conversations off camera about this on how annoyed we get when we get thrown into these group chats and then it's like, you two connect. And you're like, what? Now it's become a task that I didn't sign up for. right? And I think that's a critical thing. So are you the double opt-in? That's a huge tactic. I highly recommend for anybody paying attention to this. If you're making that introduction, verify with both sides. Do exactly what Cal said before you make that introduction and connection. And then I think when they have that initial conversation and then they meet and something nice happens, you've done your job. I think that kind of ends up like a friend plus point or whatever you want to call it, if we want to quantify it. Whatever happens on the long term is not in your hands neither, but as long as you've gotten that initial nice connection, I think that's really, really cool. For someone who's maybe just starting out, wants to kind of be more connected, wants to maybe build on that, see if it's something they enjoy or see something that, we've talked about how it has this residual positive net benefit that we don't quite measure, but okay, it's a habit I want to bring in. Is it something you proactively look for? Because, how do you manage not being needy to do it, but then still being like, hey, it's something I want to do more active. I just never thought about doing it before.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's definitely a balance to doing it. I remember back in like 2012 when I was a few years back after my trip, and I'm like, wow, it's really valuable for me to connect people and they're really getting benefit off of it. I was like, okay, I'm going to set a goal for the next year to connect 2 people every week for the whole year. And there was like 3-4 weeks where like people just came into my life and I was like, oh, you need to meet this person, you need to meet that. And then around week 4, week 5, there wasn't really anyone that I felt super compelled to connect. And I felt myself starting to dig and be like, I could connect this person with that person. And then like I wrote the message and I was like, this isn't good enough. I was like, okay, there's no one to connect right now. Let me wait. And then the next week, same thing. No one was there for me. I'm like, oh, I'm falling behind my goal. I got to connect 2 people every week for a year, 52 connections, see what that does. And then the next week, nothing again. I was like, all right, there's nothing to connect. And then the following week, there was 4 people, 4 pairs that I wanted to connect. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm back on track. But ultimately, it's not necessarily beneficial to like set a number like that because it's just an arbitrary number that you're picking. There's an internal feeling that you get, like an aha moment almost, when you start talking to somebody and this other person just comes into your mind. You're like, oh, I need to connect you with this person. And then you think a little bit, like, yeah. That's when you then become proactive and make the connection. But if you're forcing the connection, that forcing energy, that neediness energy that you mentioned, that comes through and people pick up on that. And it's slightly less motivating for them to then want to take the energy to connect to these people because we're a lot more complex than we think. We can pick up on people's vibes. We can pick up on how people are feeling. Even if we don't consciously think about it, our bodies can feel where people are at. And so when you have that like aha moment, when you hear someone or you meet someone, you start hearing their story, like, oh, it would be beneficial for me to, this person just went through this journey. Let me connect you with them. That internal spark is really the catalyst for you to want to connect someone rather than just being like, I want to connect more people.
Yeah, I think if that, I would call that little spark like joy. Like there's a little joy, and then when you come from that energy, then it's definitely cancels out any of the neediness because you just genuinely want to get it done. Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.